start reading and discussing it. So there were certain pastimes in Vedic literature that were especially very, you could say, significant or important in Srila Prabhupada's life here, his pastimes here on this earth. And when Srila Prabhupada arrived in New York, he was already quite aged. He was already almost 70 years old, and he was not in such good health. And so he told his disciples on many occasions that I can leave at any time, and I can give up my body at any time. He had 2 heart attacks on the way when he came from America. And so Prabhupada was always very conscious of that, and the devotees were also very conscious of that. So while that was there, Krishna consciousness was spreading all over America. So many devotees all over the world were joining Krishna consciousness. And one of the things that Prabhupada taught the devotees to do was to enact dramas, to do wonderful dramas for the Lord. And we continue that tradition, right? Just like the children are doing dramas for Diwali. By enacting and performing dramas about the Lord, we get a sense of attachment for the Lord. Because by performing in a drama, we remember the Lord's pastimes. It's a way of absorbing ourselves in the pastimes of the Lord, and also a way of glorifying Krishna. By reenacting his pastimes, it's a way of glorifying him. So the devotees would perform many different dramas, and they would do these dramas for the pleasure of Lord Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. Particularly, they would do the dramas for his pleasure. So when they would do it, after that they would perform it, and Prabhupada would be present there when they would be performing. And in certain occasions, Srila Prabhupada greatly appreciated the dramas. In other occasions, he would correct them and tell them, well, fix it like this or do it like this. And so one time the devotees enacted this drama of the passing away of Bhīṣmadeva, his story of his giving up his body. And when they did this, then many devotees noticed that in the crowd, where Srila Prabhupada was sitting, through the crowd, those who were doing the drama, they noticed that tears were streaming down Srila Prabhupada's eyes. So Prabhupada was very, you could say, very moved by the performance of the devotees, and particularly by the example of Bhīṣmadeva. Because Bhīṣmadeva is a very courageous, outspoken, yet solemn character in the pastimes of the Lord. And he has a special position. Who knows, what is Bhīṣmadeva known to be? What is his special title?
Pitamaha.
Pitamaha. He's the grandfather or the grandsire. Yes, Prabhu, that's one of his very special titles. He's Pitamaha. What else? There's one more.
He's the foremost.
Ganga Putra.
He is Ganga Putra. He is the son of Ganga, and Ganga is the purest. She is purity personified. So how could something coming from Ganga have any impurity in it, right? He's born from the Ganges, and millions of people go to the Ganges to bathe. So imagine who he was. Just imagine who Bhīṣmadeva was. Deepak, you were also saying something? You can unmute.
Guruji, Brahmacharya, I think what I heard.
Yes.
Brahmacharya he was. So maybe you can correct him. Yeah.
Yes. The word Bhīṣma itself means terrible. It means terrible. And who has a name by the name of terrible, right? I once knew a family, they're from India, and they had named their daughter Dukhi or something like this, which means sad. And I was just so shocked, like, why would anyone name their child Dukhi, which means sad, or something else? It was like, um, it was it was even a stronger word than that. I don't remember exactly, but sometimes once in a while you'll see people, maybe there was a certain context to their birth, like, once, the way material world works, someone is passing away and the child comes at the same time. So as a memory of that incident, they might, the name might be a bit odd. But generally it doesn't happen. But Bhīṣmadev's name was terrible, Bhīṣma. And why? Because this was not actually his original name. His original name was Gangaputra, the son of Ganga. But then he received the name Bhīṣma because of his terrible vow. And that terrible vow was that when he was a young man and his father wanted to marry, then he made a vow that he would never marry in his entire life. And for a young prince whose father and who he himself basically was the emperor of the world, imagine, you have the most power in the world. Might as well mention it right now, since we are right. You're the next Biden, right? You're the president of hopefully the future president of the United States of America, right? And you make the vow that I give up all enjoyment. You have so much power behind you. You have so much prestige. And furthermore, well, for an old man that makes sense, but he was a young man in the start of his youth. He was like 20 years old at that time. He hadn't enjoyed material life at all. He was just about to get married.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, yes.
Did Bhīṣmadev have, sorry to interrupt you, this Bhīṣmadev, he had one more name called as Devavrat?
Yes, he was also Devavrat. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Another third name. That was because he was basically one of the gods. He had grown up amongst the Devas. And so he also had a connection with the gods because his mother was the goddess.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
So he took this terrible vow of lifelong celibacy. And after that, then he became known as Bhīṣma. So, so Bhīṣma, this was another one of his qualities, that he gave up, and his sacrifice was something that no one else could have done. Actually, only a great sage and renunciate could be in the middle of a kingdom surrounded by thousands of beautiful women, as kingdoms are, and palaces and princesses, and surrounded by so much wealth, basically the most powerful warrior alive at that time, and give it all up. Why? Just to please his father. His father didn't even ask him. He just thought, what's the big deal? So imagine his austerity and his inner strength. So Bhīṣma, he's known as for that reason as well. But there's also one more title that's given to him, and so others who haven't had a chance to speak, they can suggest what is a special title that's given to Bhīṣma. We said Devavrata, Pitamaha, Bhīṣma, Gangaputra, Mathura Priya Prabhu, I think you may know. Bhīṣma is one of the, or Rupa Vilas Prabhu.
Vasus.
But he's one of the Vasus. Yes, Venkatesh Prabhu, that's correct. He's one of the Vasus.
One of the Mahajan.
Yes, he's one of the Mahajans. So there are 12 Mahajans. There are 12 great personalities who are so exalted that they get the title of Mahajan. Just like we have these Nobel Peace Prizes, right? We give Nobel laureates. there's so many intelligent people in the world, there's so many great people in the world, but people who are just outstanding, they get a Nobel Prize. So in the same way, Bhīṣmadeva is like that, where he is so outstanding that he actually becomes one of the 12 Mahajans, equal to Prahlad. Who else is a Mahajan? Prahlad, Bhīṣma. It's escaping me right now. Yes, Yamaraj. Yamaraj, and who else, Mataji?
Narada.
Narada, yes. Some Mahajans.
Lord Shiva,
Lord Shiva.
Bali Maharaj.
Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj is that one, yes, as well.
Then,
Bali Maharaj.
Janaka.
Janak Maharaj.
Yes, Krishna mentions him in the Gita, kings such as Janak. Yes. Janaka was the father of Sita.
Sita.
Mother Sita. Yes.
That's you, Prabhuji.
No, that was the
Brahma Kumaras.
the Brahma Kumaras. Yes, the 4 Kumaras. Yes,
The
they're also-
Yamaraja, Prabhuji. Yamaraj.
Yamaraj also, absolutely.
Prahlad Maharaj, Yamaraj, and Bhishma, Bali.
Yes.
Mm.
So all of these, they were such great Mahajans because of their extraordinary character, right? I mean, they're great devotees, but they also, like, they exhibited something that deeply inspires something in us. Like Bali Maharaj, he sacrificed the whole world. And another example of renunciation, he sacrificed the whole world for the Lord and to keep his vow. He was an emblem of truthfulness, right? To keep his vow, he sacrificed the whole world. He sacrificed his guru. He sacrificed everything, and so he becomes the emblem of sacrifice, of charity, of truthfulness, all of these qualities. In the same way, Bhīṣmadeva, he becomes the emblem of renunciation, just for the pleasure of his father, who was also a devotee, and for the pleasure of the Lord. He gives up all material pleasure. One time, Bhīṣmadeva and Vyasadeva met. So as we know, Vyasadeva is the author of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And they met. Why? Because they were actually stepbrothers. They were actually stepbrothers. Why? Because Bhīṣmadeva's father was married to Ganga, his mother. But then when Ganga left his father, then he was married to Satyavati. Because Ganga, she belongs to the heavens, so she could only spend so much time with Shantanu, Bhīṣmadeva's father. So she goes back to the heavens. And when she goes back, then Bhīṣmadeva marries Satyavati, who is the daughter of a fisherman. A lot of fishermen's sons and daughters become special people. Kṛṣṇa was also the son of the apparent son of a fisherman. He wasn't, but he was living in a fisherman's home. So same thing, Satyavati, she is supposedly the daughter of a fisherman, of a boatman. And therefore her trade was just to take people across the river. But she was as beautiful as a goddess. And so one time the king is out hunting and he needs to cross, he sees her. And there's a very nice, depiction in the Mahabharata. And so he sees her, he falls instantaneously in love with her. And Shantanu, he's a human being, a very exalted human being who was married to Ganga, Bhishma's mother, who was a demigod, a goddess. And when these marriages happen, many times we see in Vedic culture, it turns out to be initially it's like the man celebrates, he scored a goddess. But it generally turns out to be a very sour deal for the man. Why? Because when in a relationship, when one person is more qualified in one way, in terms of beauty, strength, intelligence, wisdom, especially beauty, then it's the other person who benefits more. So if you're beautiful, that's good. But if the person who marries you is less beautiful and you're more beautiful, that person becomes very happy, right? They get a very beautiful spouse. So the goddess is going to be naturally always more extraordinary than any human being, more qualified in every way, more, just everything in every way. And Mother Ganga, furthermore, she's, purity and love for Krishna and devotion, everything personified. So after Ganga leaves Shantanu, the father of Bhīṣma, Shantanu he's basically brokenhearted. He cannot rule the kingdom. He cannot think of anything else other than Ganga. He is just devastated, completely devastated. And Bhīṣma, he knows this. And he knows that his mother has left his father. She had to. She also didn't really have a choice. And his heart goes out to his father. And the citizens know this. So when Shantanu sees Satyavati, it's like a new life for him. Because here is someone who can take the place of Ganga. His heart is, empty, it's sore, and now he's found someone, right? So therefore, he marries Satyavati. And I won't go into the story, but because Shantanu marries Satyavati, Bhīṣma naturally becomes like her son. Even though Satyavati is very young, Shantanu is older, but because he's married to her, he takes in that role, she's like his mother. And Satyavati, being this beautiful goddess, naturally, other people had also found her to be very beautiful. And so one time, and her work is the work of a boatman, so she meets a lot of people every day. So one time, the great sage Parashara, he was needing to cross the river. And so he goes on a boat ride across the river with Satyavati. Now, Vedic culture was so pure at that time that even though Satyavati was such a beautiful maiden, such a beautiful girl, she was perfectly safe as a boat girl. She, none of the citizens or the villagers ever, coveted her. No one even saw her with lustful eyes, because this was a previous age. This was the age of Dvapar Yuga, right? An age that is not even Satyug, but it's 1,000 times better than Kali Yuga. And so when Shantanu, of course, sees her, he sees her as his future wife. He wants to marry her, and so he asks for the hand from he's the emperor of the world, but he asks for the hand from her father. And until her father says yes, he does not take her. Again, a testament to how great this culture was. If you're the emperor of the world, you say, you give your daughter to me or away with your head, right? But the father has such a moral and, you could say, a social position that even the king could not take away the daughter without his permission, showing how egalitarian Vedic culture was. The king was a king, but even he was under the bounds of dharma, and of karma as well. So, so when Parashara Muni is sitting in the boat of Satyavati, his mind starts to become attracted by Satyavati. And by this story, we will also understand how exalted Satyavati was, because the writer of the Srimad Bhagavatam is born from her. It's all very connected so much, Mahabharata and the Bhagavatam. So Parashara, his mind is becoming attracted to her. And he's a great sage. And you may wonder, if he was such a great sage, how is it possible that his mind is overcome by lust? So Parashara, he's looking at Satyavati, feeling attracted by her. And at that point, the sage understands that the reason why he's feeling attracted by Satyavati is because the Lord actually wants him to have a child. And you say, well, that's very convenient. But no, Parashara, he is such a great sage that he knew that the only way that my mind can even have a bad thought, or not a bad thought in this case, that a lustful thought can even go in my mind, is if there is the desire of the Lord that is causing it. That's how great of a sage he was. And we'll see, he can actually walk his talk. He is actually that great of a sage. So as a sage, he knew it's not possible. My mind is so pure that it's not possible for someone to, for my mind to be distracted. It's just not possible. That's how strong in mind I am. And so therefore, because it's becoming distracted, there's a plan of the Lord. So Parashara, at that point in the boat, he proposes to Satyavati. And he says that I would like to have a child through you. Again, the purpose is not sense enjoyment, but he proposes to her. And Satyavati tells her, he says, I'm sorry, but I'm a virgin. And if we engage in this, my virginity will be gone. And this is not correct. And so therefore, although you are a great sage, and since you are a very great sage, she knew about Parashara, I will, say no to your request. And Parashara says, do not worry. By my spiritual power, by my mystic power, I will ensure that you will always remain a virgin. That you will remain a virgin even after us having a child. And so through his mystic power, he creates an island in the middle of the river, which no one can see and which is completely hidden. And then they have the child. Even that, it was more on the subtle level. There's no physical interaction with the sages and every previous times. It was on the subtle level. And from that child comes, from that those parents come the child, Vyasadeva. Vyasa, who's none other than the incarnation of the Lord. So we know that Parashara Muni and Satyavati were very exalted souls, and Kṛṣṇa wanted to come through them in the form of Vyasadeva. And so Vyasadeva, who is a literary incarnation of God, is described, came through Satyavati. So Satyavati is the mother of Vyasa. And Satyavati is also the stepmother of Bhīṣma. And therefore, both of them had a brotherly relationship. So one time Vyasa comes to meet Bhīṣma in the kingdom. And when he comes to meet him, then he tells Bhīṣma, he says, I am a sage, and you are also a sage. I am a monk, and you are also a monk. But he says, but of the two, he says, you are a greater monk. Why? Because I am a sage living in the forest. I have no attraction, nothing around me. I am living in the forest, and therefore I'm a sage, and it's quite easy for me to be a sage. But you are living in the kingdom, amongst power, prestige, women, so much opulence, and yet you are still a sage. And therefore, your position is the highest position. How beautiful this is. It's showing that anyone can be a sage. We can be in the middle of family life. We can be in the middle of the city. We don't have to run to the forest, but we become a sage through our devotion to the Lord and our austerities and our dedication to the Lord. So for this reason also, Bhīṣmadeva is a Mahajan. Because while living in this world, he was not of it. Just like Jesus Christ said, be in this world, but don't be of it. He was like a lotus flower. He was surrounded by the Kauravas. He was surrounded by ignorance and envy and greed and jealousy. Yet he himself was like a lotus. He rose above all of that. So this is who Bhīṣma was. And now I will share the screen. And let's read a few verses from this section. So this section, it begins with the end of the Mahabharata, with the end of Bhīṣma's life. And it's entitled, The Passing Away of Bhīṣmadeva. So this is after the battle of Kurukshetra. This is when Yudhishthira and the Pandavas have won the battle. And after this great massacre, Yudhishthira Maharaj is looking for solace. Being a great divine soul, he cannot digest the fact that so many people have died, that the war is so horrible, it's so bad. And so he's feeling so devastated that no one is able to give him solace. And at that point, Lord Kṛṣṇa is there. All the sages are there. But even Kṛṣṇa himself, it said, are not able to console Bhīṣmadeva. And Lord Kṛṣṇa, console Yudhishthira Maharaj. And Lord Kṛṣṇa feels that in order to console Bhīṣmadeva, in order to console Maharaj Yudhishthira, the only person who can do this is Bhīṣmadeva. And furthermore, he wanted to glorify Bhīṣmadeva at the time of his passing. And so he leads all the Pandavas to where Bhīṣma is lying there on the bed of arrows. And there's so many stories with Bhīṣmadeva, it's very difficult to describe them today, but Bhīṣmadeva had the benediction of dying at his will. He had the benediction of dying at his will. And so therefore, although arrows had been shot through his body, Bhīṣmadeva did not pass away, because he was waiting to make sure that the Pandavas would be victorious after the battle. And he was waiting there to come and see them, and also to see Kṛṣṇa, so that in his final moment, he could see the Supreme Lord, and he could leave his body while looking at the Lord face to face. Imagine what a passing this is, that he could see the Lord face to face. He saw the Lord face to face while lying there on the battle. Bhīṣmadeva is described to be in the chivalrous rasa. So his rasa with the Lord is one of fighting. So just like we have some friends with whom we play tennis or we wrestle, so we play competitive games with them, and they're on the opposing side. And although they're on the opposite side, they're our friends, but we enjoy playing with them. Why? Because we enjoy the competitive spirit with them. So in the same way, there's some devotees of the Lord who worship the Lord in a competitive spirit. And Bhīṣmadeva is one such devotee. So let me just put this here. 1 second. I have some feedback coming here. Okay. So imagine the scene. He's lying there on the battle, and arrows are through his body, and the Kṛṣṇa, the Pandavas, they're all standing next to him. And the Srimad Bhagavatam starts to describe this scene. Sutta Goswami said, being afraid for having killed so many subjects on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthira went to the scene of the massacre. There, Bhīṣmadeva was lying on a bed of arrows, about to pass away. Randy, would you like to read the next one? Text 2.
At that time, all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots drawn by first-class horses, decorated with gold ornaments. With them were Vyasa and Rishis, like Duama, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others.
Sham Madhavi Mataji.
O sage among us, the Brahmanas, Lord Kṛṣṇa, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus King Yudhishthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Guhyakas.
Andrew, you can read next. or Nirav, you can read text 4. Deepak, you can read text 4.
This is Andrew. I can't.
Okay.
You scrolled and I lost my place.
No problem. Text 4. Yes. No.
See him, Bhīṣma, lying on the ground like a demigod fallen from the sky. Pandava King Yudhishthira, along with his younger brothers and Lord Kṛṣṇa, bowed down before him.
Deepak ji, next one.
Yeah, case 5. Am I audible, Prabhuji?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Just to see the chief of the descendants of the king Bharata, all the great souls in the universe, namely the rishis amongst the demigods, brahmanas and the kings, all situated in the quality of goodness, were assembled there.
Hare Krishna. Devi Murthy, you can read next.
All the sages like Parvarta Muni, Narada, Dhaumya, Vyasa, the incarnation of God, Bhridashva, Bhardwaja, and Parshuram and disciples, Vashishta, Indra, Pramada, Trita, Grishtamada, Asita, Kakshivan, Gautam, Atri, Kaushik, and Sudarshan were present.
Venkatesh Prabhu, you can read next.
And many others like Sukadeva Goswami and other purified souls, Kashyapa and Angirasa and others, all accompanied by the respective disciples, arrived there.
Shama Karuna Mataji, text 9.
Is it 10 or 9, Prabhuji?
9.
Prabhuji, can you scroll down little? Because I can't.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Bhīṣmadeva, who was the best amongst the 8 Vasus, received and welcomed all the great and powerful rishis who were assembled there, for he knew perfectly all the religious principles according to time and place.
Mathura Priya Prabhu, text 10.
11, Prabhuji?
Yes.
The sons of Maharaj...
No, 10. It's 10.
Lord Kṛṣṇa is situated in everyone's heart, yet he manifests his transcendental form by his eternal potency. This very Lord was sitting before Bhīṣmadeva, and since Bhīṣmadeva knew of his glories, he worshipped him duly.
Text 11, Arupa Vilas Prabhu.
The sons of Maharaj Pandu were sitting silently nearby, overtaken with affection for their dying grandfather. Seeing this, Bhīṣmadeva congratulated them with feeling. There were tears of ecstasy in his eyes, for he was overwhelmed by love and affection.
And I think we got it. Miranda, you can read the next one, text 12.
Bhīṣmadeva said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God and religion."
As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon the great General Pandu's death, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, she suffered a great deal also because of your actions. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible, Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. O King, no one can know the plan of the Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. O best among the descendants of Bharata, Yudhishthira, I maintain, therefore, that all this is within the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now the appointed administrative head, and, my Lord, you should now take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. This Sri Kṛṣṇa is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayan, the supreme enjoyer, but he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us, and he is bewildering us with his self-created energy. O King, Lord Shiva, Narada, the sage amongst the demigods, and Kapila, the incarnation of Godhead, all know very confidently about his glories through direct contact. O King, that personality whom, out of ignorance only, you thought to be your maternal cousin, your very dear friend, well-wisher, counselor, messenger, benefactor, etc., is that very personality of Godhead, Sri Kṛṣṇa. Being the absolute personality of Godhead, he is present in everyone's heart. He is equally kind to everyone, and he is free from the false ego of differentiation. Therefore, whatever he does is free from material inebriety. He is equibalanced. Yet, despite his being equally kind to everyone, he has graciously come before me while I am ending my life, for I am his unflinching servitor. And the last two verses, the personality of Godhead who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation, and by chanting the holy name, and by chanting of the holy name, releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of his quitting the material body. May my Lord, who is four-handed and whose beautifully decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as the rising sun, is smiling, kindly await me at the moment when I quit this material body. So the great devotees of the Lord, they know that they are the servants of the Lord. So although they are, you could say, full of humility, they at the same time, they're proud of only one thing, and that is that they have such a great master. And so here in this text 22, it's very significant that he's saying, yet despite his being equally kind to everyone, he has graciously come before me while I am ending my life, for I am his unflinching servitor. So the devotee has no identity other than serving the Lord. And so therefore it's important to understand that Bhīṣmadeva's statement there is not a statement of pride. He's not saying, oh, I am a great devotee of the Lord, and therefore the Lord has come. He's actually feeling so grateful, almost surprised that the Lord has come when he's leaving his body. But then, so he's saying that the Lord is coming because I'm leaving my body, and this is his great kindness, how merciful he is, he's saying. And he's also saying that I am his unflinching servitor, because the devotee just has no other identity, no other way of understanding themselves other than understanding them in relation to the Supreme Lord, as a servant of the Supreme Lord. Lord Chaitanya, he says, Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Krishnera Nityadas, that our Swarupa, our identity, is that we are an eternal servant of the Lord. So when we say that I am a servant of the Lord, then that is not a statement of pride. That is simply a statement of fact. That is something we can say without any pride, because I am a servant of the Lord. Therefore, we always sign saying, your servant. or in service. Why? Because we are our identity is one of service. So that was actually another point, and I wanted to now read the purport for this verse, which is a very famous verse that Bhīṣmadeva is saying here. I'll read the translation one more time. O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord, Sri Kṛṣṇa. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. The bewilderment of Maharaj Yudhishthira over his past sinful acts and the resultant sufferings, etc., is completely negated by the great authority Bhīṣma, one of the 12 authorized persons, Mahajans. Bhīṣma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhishthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. So what can we understand about it? It is useless also to inquire about it. Even the exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot understand the plan of the Lord. The best policy is simply to abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. The sufferings of the Pandavas were never due to their past deeds. The Lord had to execute the plan of establishing the kingdom of virtue, and therefore his own devotees suffered temporarily in order to establish the conquest of virtue. Bhīṣmadeva was certainly satisfied by seeing the triumph of virtue, and he was glad to see King Yudhishthira on the throne, although he himself fought against him. Even a great fighter like Bhīṣma could not win the battle of Kurukshetra because the Lord wanted to show that vice cannot conquer virtue, regardless of who tries to execute it. Bhīṣmadeva was a great devotee of the Lord, but he chose to fight against the Pandavas by the will of the Lord, because the Lord wanted to show that a fighter like Bhīṣma cannot win on the wrong side. Om Gyanam Timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurudmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave. So, this is actually one of my favorite verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's actually a very powerful verse, and there's so many messages in this verse. There's not just one message, many messages in this verse that come out. One of the first messages is that the quality of a devotee to accept what is beyond our control. So even there's a great sage by the name of Confucius in the Chinese tradition. And Confucius, he said how, he said that a sage, he said, is someone who follows, he said, the decree of heaven that's present in the human heart. In other words, a sage is someone who does the right thing. That's one thing. And he says a second thing is that the sage is someone, the sage is a sage because the sage will also accept things that are beyond one's control. So the sage has two qualities, and one is that they do the right thing, and so in that way they are virtuous, and they're also humble and knowledgeable in the sense that they accept destiny. They accept that which is beyond our control. So in spite of our good efforts, one second, Sita is. So that's the first message, that we as devotees, we strive to do the right thing, but then so many times in our spiritual life, we'll see that in spite of our devotional service and activities, things happen that are beyond our control. And that then the devotee accepts. The devotee that is part of Krishna consciousness is having the inner strength and having the surrender and the devotion to the Lord, that we can accept those adverse situations. And my own personal experience with this point, why it rung so deeply when I read this verse, is that I had one time come in the habit of always regretting, that, oh, I wish things had happened like this, or lamenting, right? Lamentation. Oh, I wish things had happened this way, or maybe if I had done this, even for my own self, maybe if I had done this, or I've done that, or said this, or done this, then things should have been better, or things would have been better. But that consciousness is actually a consciousness of ignorance, because that consciousness comes from the idea that that I'm the controller, that we are the controllers. If we understand that Krishna is the controller, if most of the things in this world are not within our own hands anyway, then we will not lament, and we will not feel that sense of, you could say, lamentation that overcomes a person. Because we're grounded in knowledge that some things are in my control, but even my own actions to some degree are not in my control. Even my own actions are under my control to a certain degree, but not completely under my control. And so Krishna must have made this situation because it was supposed to be this way. I learned something through this. I gained something through this. I benefited something through this. And so however devastating the situation seems to be, it was a plan of the Lord. And that's the point that Maharaj Yudhishthira is unable to accept. He's like he's the, grounded in dharma. He's the epitome of dharma, but he's like, why did this battle have to happen and have to happen in this way? And Bhīṣmadeva is telling him that stop trying to understand everything with your mind. This is beyond you. This is the plan of the Lord. It's something that is far greater than me. Like in the story of the Bible of Job, right? When Job asks the Lord, he says, why are you putting me through this distress? Then God responds to him, because he's a very sincere devotee. Job in the Bible is very sincere. God responds to him by saying, did you create the earth at the beginning of creation? Did you set the wind in motion? Did you make do you make fire burn? So he answers this question by saying, look, I made all this. This is my plan. So we understand, the devotee understands the Lord's plan is perfect, but it's not always open to inquiry. So this is the first anartha that it can help us overcome this verse, is the anartha of lamentation. Hankering is the mode of passion, but hankering and lamentation also, too much, you could say, crying and grieving is also a symptom of passion and ignorance. And therefore one in knowledge of Vaishnava or a Brahmana, it's described, does not lament. They don't allow themselves to fall in the ocean of lamentation, which can become a self-absorption in some ways, and to rise above it. So we may feel very righteous that, oh, I'm lamenting and I'm so sad and I'm so fallen and I'm so this and so that, but actually it's a form of self-absorption, right? We're just thinking of ourselves, not about others and how we can serve and help humanity. So the quality of a Vaishnava is they don't lament so much. And then the second thing that this verse tells us so nicely is that Bhīṣmadeva, and this section in general, he's telling Maharaj Yudhishthira that you have no reason to lament. Why? Because whatever you did based on the instruction of the sages, of the scriptures, and Lord Krishna himself. So having said the previous point, someone might say, well, if everything is a plan of the Lord, then where is my role? Well, things are part of the plan of the Lord, yet we are also liable, and we are also responsible for our own actions. We don't fall into lamentation because of that, because we also understand there's someone above us and there's things outside of our control. But we may feel a sense of anxiety that what should I do? And we actually go through this anxiety on a day-to-day basis in our life. That is actually, we don't realize it, but that's the biggest question of our life every day. What should I do? Should I go left or should I go right? Today, should I go for a walk or should I stay home? Should I study this or should I study that? Should I speak to this person or should I not? It's always, what should I do? Though explicitly we don't recognize it, it's actually the only question that we ask ourselves. And because this is the biggest question in life, this is the most important thing that we have to reflect upon, is how should one act? And how do we know, how can we come to peace with our own mind that we know that we did the right thing? Because maybe it wasn't the right decision, maybe it was. We know that we did the right thing when we are guided and we act under the guidance of Guru, of Sadhus, and of Shastra. Unfortunately, we don't have access to Lord Kṛṣṇa himself present before us. So we don't have access to the Lord where we can ask him a few questions. It would be very nice. But we're not that exalted like the Pandavas. And so therefore Kṛṣṇa has still given us three things. The sadhus, the guru, the teacher, the specific one who we've taken shelter of, which we may not have right now, but then we may have some among the sadhus, someone who we are taking guidance from. We should always have, who is our guide? We should always have someone that we are taking guidance from actively, so that the person is in the role of the guru. And then we have the shastras, the scriptures. And so whatever we do that is approved by the community of sadhus, by our guru, and by the sadhus, and by the shastra, the scriptures, that activity will then be spiritual activity. And therefore, whatever the result of that activity is, the Lord will take responsibility for it. Kṛṣṇa will support us, or Kṛṣṇa will, we are not liable because we were following their direction. So in the same way, Maharaj Yudhishthira, he only went into this battle upon the instruction of the Lord himself, of the sadhus, and of the scriptures. And therefore, Bhīṣmadeva tells Maharaj Yudhishthira that therefore you have no reason to lament. You have nothing to lose. So this is the third one, the second point. And the third point in this verse, which is I think a point that Prabhupada is making very explicitly here, is that sometimes in this material world we find very, very pious people, very exalted people, but for some reason they're fighting on the wrong side. Like they're basically good people, but they're on the wrong side. And so Kṛṣṇa is giving a very powerful message here. He's saying that no matter how pious we are, no matter how good we are, if we are following a path, if we are taking up a position that is not approved by the Lord, by the devotees, and by the scriptures, that is not, you could say, no matter how pious we ourselves are, if we're not following the path of religion, then ultimately we will be unsuccessful. There won't be success. So Bhīṣmadeva was pure himself. He was a Mahajan. He was a pure devotee of the Lord. But the Lord wanted to show that even if you are such a great personality, if you're fighting on the wrong side, even due to circumstance, like in the case of Bhīṣma, his vow, which he could not break, you're still not going to be successful, because the Lord does not approve of that. So Maharaj Yudhishthira, why was he successful? Maharaj Yudhishthira was very pure, was very great, was very exalted, and Bhīṣmadeva was very pure and very exalted. Both of them were pure and exalted. But Bhīṣmadeva was fighting under the direction of the Lord and his devotees and the scriptures. Yudhishthira Maharaj was fighting. But Bhīṣmadeva, he was fighting on the side that was not guided by the Lord. It did not have that divine guidance. So these are the three takeaway points. That given that we should have the knowledge that everything is the plan of the Lord, therefore the devotee, Bhīṣmadeva is telling Maharaj Yudhishthira, don't lament, don't cry. Second thing that we learn is that one should always be guided by the scriptures, by the sages in whatever we do, especially in the big decisions in our life. And the third point is that we should never, no matter how exalted we are, we should fight on the side of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Wherever the scriptures are, wherever the teachings are, wherever the sages are, that's what we need to follow the path of dharma. And due to some, you could say, some personal dharmic calculation, right? Bhishma was calculating that I have to keep my vow. This is my dharma. Due to that calculation, he was fighting on the wrong side. So due to some personal dharma or calculation, we should not choose the wrong side. Krishna is showing that even if one's family member, even if one's close relative is on the wrong side, is not on the side of dharma, one should choose the side of dharma. So Bhishma had this, lineage with the kingdom, and so therefore he was choosing that side. But Krishna is telling Arjuna in the battle, he's saying, even if your teachers, your grandparents, your relatives are on the other side, if they're standing on the side of dharma, it's your duty to fight. So any comments, questions, thoughts, reflections on this entire section? Of course, this verse is there, but other verses are also there.
Hare Krishna. Yes. So I had a question about our own passing away, our own leaving this body. Is that Bhīṣmadeva, he was a great devotee, and he remembered Krishna at the end of his life. But we may be in situation, we may not be pious enough, we may not be in a situation to remember Krishna at the end of life. So what will be our destiny in that situation? Yeah.
That's a nice question, a very good point. We were not as exalted as Bhīṣmadeva. How can we remember the Lord at the end of our life? Would anyone like to answer that question? Would anyone like to suggest an answer? How can we attain the ultimate goal at the end of our life?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, by daily chanting and thinking of him and engage ourselves in the devotional service. In my aspect, I think this was...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mother. So by daily practice, like they say, practice, yes. Practice makes a man perfect. So if we practice remembering Krishna every day, then when the time comes, then we will remember Krishna. Like they say, Mahatma Gandhi, of course, we don't know exactly, but it's well known. I mean, they say that Mahatma Gandhi, at the last moment of his death, when someone shot him, then he said, "Hey Ram." It just came out of his mouth. Why? He was in the middle of politics. He was there talking with ministers. He was not, in a holy place. But why those names came out? Because he had some practice in chanting it. He was taking the name of Ram on a daily basis. Therefore, when that moment came, which came all of a sudden, he had no idea, came as a shock. He didn't say, "Curse you," or "Go away, you bastard." He said, "Hey Ram."
I think he used to take, even in his prison, the Bhagavad Gita, and he used to read it in the prison and, I mean, in the jail, and wherever he used to go, he used to carry the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes. He's in prison for many years, and I think he read the Gita there many times. Yes.
Go, Prabhu. Go, Prabhu. Go, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, can I say something?
Yes, yes.
I think quoting Mahatma Gandhi, what I have read autobiography and certain facts, and what I based on my understanding, one thing in that great person, I observed that he has truthfulness. So he preserved that truthfulness, and that helped him to sail that river, like river of world. So he has one quality. Maybe someone can question. I am saying in different context. Maybe someone can question, but what I understand, he has that quality, that he was very truthfulness, that he preserved all along his life. So maybe if someone has any nature like good nature, like truthfulness, God can come in his end life.
Yes, yes. But truthfulness by itself is not sufficient in of itself to take us to God. Truthfulness is a very important quality. It's the quality of sattva gun. It's the quality of a devotee. Krishna says this in the Gita. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam which Bali Maharaj actually says. He says, in this world, Mother Earth can handle any weight in this world, anything that is heavy in this world. Mother Earth can hold it. But Mother Earth cannot hold the weight of an untruthful person. Right? So what you're saying is very true. The glories of truth are there. But by truthfulness alone, we cannot reach the Lord. That is a starting point. That's very important. The Lord is known as the ultimate truth. But we must also have bhakti or devotion to the Lord. Both of them must be there. Truthfulness and devotion. So there's also some devotion there. The bhakti was there. And that bhakti is very important along with that. So, but the truthfulness can be the truthfulness of following the vows that we make at the time of our diksha initiation, right? So every devotee takes some vows, and they're chanting 16 rounds every day, following the 4 regulated principles. So if a person is firm on those vows, they can go back home back to Godhead. But it has to be truthfulness for the spiritual activities. Just being a pious person may not be sufficient.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I've heard that, I mean, in one of the talks of Amarendra Prabhu, though even we don't remember the Lord when we leave this body, if you're in Krishna consciousness, Lord, as the Chaitya Guru, he will help us and take us back to his abode. That's what...
Yes, that's a very nice point. That's a very nice point. Randy, did you want to make a comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I just was curious. You asked if anybody had any questions or comments, but to be honest, this made my head spin. I thought about so many different things on today's lecture, so I can't really just pinpoint one. But following up on the questions of our own death, I've really wanted this clarification, so I'm glad that we're talking about it. Is at the time of our death, the only qualification to go back to Godhead, remembering Krishna? Or what if we're not practiced enough or experienced enough, or or is that the only qualification that we need? What if I don't feel that, what if I remembered, what if I were to, die tomorrow, but I don't feel like I'm qualified to meet Kṛṣṇa. But what if I were fortunate enough to remember him at the time of my death?
Okay. Yes, very good question.
Thank you.
Yes. Mataji, do you want to give a comment? You're unmuted yourself. No. Okay, so this actually goes back to this other question that Devi Murthy asked. And that is that, so we saw various answers as to how to reach the Lord at the time of our death. Some of them were practice, by practicing Krishna consciousness. We have to remember the Lord at the time of death. We talked about Gandhi. All of these things are absolutely essential, but they're essential due to one reason that actually is a thing that takes us back to Godhead, for those of us who are not on the level of Bhīṣmadeva especially. And that is the mercy of the pure devotees of the Lord, and particularly the mercy of the pure devotee who comes in the form of the spiritual master. And this goes back to Mataji's point also, the Chaitya Guru, that how we may not be qualified to go back to Godhead, and we also may not be qualified or practiced enough to remember the Lord. However, if during the course of our life we have fulfilled the instruction of the pure devotee of the Lord, then the pure devotee will guarantee us that if you fulfill this spiritual practice, or so to say, you do this bhakti, then I will take you back to Godhead. And that guarantee is the most easy, powerful, and potent way to go back to Godhead. So to give the example, Srila Prabhupada on many occasions, on a few occasions, he said, if we simply follow the 4 regulated principles and chant 16 rounds of Krishna, and chant 16 nice rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day, Srila Prabhupada said, I will personally take you back home, back to God. So that is the path of the descending path rather than the ascending path. So the devotee may chant 16 rounds every day, but still not get pure love of Krishna. Why? Because they are still materially conditioned, and they still have material desires, and their chanting is maybe still a little offensive, where they're inattentive, or they offended a devotee, and so it's not pure chanting. But Prabhupada is saying that if you do this, then I will promise that I will take you back home. And so still, when Krishna said in the Gita that in order to go back to God, one has to remember him at the time of death. So still one has to remember Krishna. But what happens, and Prabhupada actually says this, is that Krishna will forcefully enter into the mind of that devotee. So we have to remember Krishna. If we don't do it ourselves, then Krishna will make us remember him at the time of death. Or not even remember. Let's say if we die in a coma or in a car accident, we don't even have time to remember. Krishna will enter into our mind.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, like this was one of my questions to Jayadvat Maharaj in the Sangha of New Jersey. Like I asked Maharaj, Maharaj, I work with a lot of dementia people. They don't even know who they are. They don't even know who their kids are. And like, how come these people will be able to remember Krishna? If somebody have done so much service, and finally if they end up having dementia due to their karma or something like that, so what would be the case of these souls who have done so much service and end up having dementia, not able to remember themselves? And Maharaj said, like, if they have done so much service, they don't have to worry that Krishna will remember them at the time of the death.
Yes.
And also, like, another comment, Prabhuji, another comment regarding the 16 rounds and 4 regulating principles. Just a week ago, I was listening to Keshwananda Prabhu, and he says that it's, Prabhupada have told 16 rounds, and like you very nicely said, it's 16 nice rounds. That nice is really very important there. And then like 4 regulative principles, we think we are following 4 regulative principles, but Keshwan Prabhu cautions us, warns us that we are not really following 4 regulative principles. Because by doing all these things, it's a purificatory process. And if you're not purely purified, if you're not completely purified, then you're not going to go back to Godhead because you're going to cause chaos there, but with all impurities. And he quoted Jesus Christ that, Jesus Christ have said that I'll be the first person, if you come back to the kingdom of God with impurities, I'll be the first person to throw you out of kingdom of God.
I see.
And the seeds of sinful activities, the seeds are always there in the mind. And Keshwan Prabhu says that to remove those seeds, it really needs a lot of sadhana and very strict regulative principles, which we cannot, imagine that, just by, when Mataji was asking the same question, Prabhuji, Prabhupada have told that 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, and Prabhupada will take us back to Godhead. And Prabhuji wants, it's not that easy.
Can I just say, this is why I'm so confused. Like, on one hand, I hear, just remember Kṛṣṇa, practice, develop a strong sadhana and follow the regulative principles, chant attentively, and relish the holy name and the nectar of it, and you will go back to Godhead. But then I also hear, if we're not pure, you can't get into heaven. So my brain is so confused.
I have a comment here.
Yes.
I heard one time Prabhupada saying that so Prabhupada was making a comment in the class that okay, to go back to Godhead, you have to be 100% pure. And then the devotee said, Prabhupada, I'm not 100% pure. Then Prabhupada said, okay, 80%. Then the devotee said, Prabhupada, I'm not 80% pure. What should I do? Then Prabhupada said, okay, 50%. Then the devotee said, Prabhupada, I don't think I can ever be 50% pure. And then Prabhupada said, okay, you just hold my dhoti, I'll take you back to Godhead. That means you just keep chanting, keep following the regulatory principles. I will take you from the back door and back to Godhead.
Yeah, that
Thank
was
you,
a nice one,
Mataji. I think that's
Mataji.
what
I
I
haven't
needed
heard.
to hear. Sorry.
Yes. No, actually, that's why it's both things. See, it's both things, that Prabhupada's words that if we chant 16 rounds every day, follow the 4 regulative principles, he'll take us back to Godhead. They will be true. In other words, that will be true. If we did it, we did it, and that will be true. But the thing is that we won't be able to do that. To chant 16 rounds every day and follow 4 regulative principles for the rest of your life is not very easy, right? We think it's easy. And, I used to think, it's easy. And then, I got married and we had 2 kids. And then starting the second child, it was like, can I chant my 16 rounds every day? Is there enough time in the day to chant 16 rounds every day? Or there's something that happens at our work, right? We all, the mothers especially, I should not speak, right? The mothers, when they have the baby, it's like the baby's up, every half an hour at night. How do they finish chanting their 16 rounds every day? So we can only actually do that if we really make an effort. If we're associating with devotees, if we're striving to please Kṛṣṇa, we're striving to please Prabhupada and devotees, then because of that association and that mercy, we'll be able to do that. So therefore, it's actually the same in every tradition. Every teaching tells us that it's always going back to God and going back to Kṛṣṇa is always a combination of 2 things. It's a combination of effort and grace. It has to be the combination of the 2. And for this reason, there's no black and white rule. Because, see, the grace, ultimately what liberates us, and the Bhagavatam is very clear on this, is the mercy of the Lord. There's nothing we can do in this world to earn the kingdom of God. We can do as much sadhana, as perfectly as we want. Be a perfect sadhaka, but we will not get the spiritual world unless the Lord is merciful. Right? So it is the mercy of the Lord that liberates us. That is a fact. That is Prabhupada, the scriptures clearly tell us. Even the Bhagavatam says that. There's a few verses I can mention. It's the mercy of the Lord. But then it's our effort that draws the mercy of the Lord in. It's our effort that draws the mercy of the Lord in. And that is different for different people. So if someone, for example, I knew this devotee, and that's why, Brandy, there's no black and white rule for this. That's why it appears confusing, but it's actually very simple also. There's one devotee, her name is Mother Kunti, and she was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And she had a very difficult life. Her life was just a little traumatic. And her first husband, she was married. That husband turned out to be an abuser, very abusive, physically abusive to her. She had to divorce him. Then she had, and he was a devotee husband, but she had to divorce him. Then she was left with a child, and her devotional spiritual life, but she never left her Krishna consciousness. She became an even more serious devotee. Then she got married again. Eventually, she had a child. She needed support. It wasn't easy at that time in the movement. Not much support also. She got married again. And then the second marriage, same thing. It was a very difficult marriage. This person actually had problems with drugs and all these things. And so it broke up. And so she went through 2 marriages. Both of them broke up. And from each marriage, she had like 1 or 2 children. And then her children, they were lost. They felt lost. Their parents were broken. But somehow or the other, she kept her Krishna consciousness together, and she kept on struggling. She would chant her rounds every day. Once in a while, she would even miss certain days. She would make them up. And at the end of her life, when she was giving up her body, here's someone who had the most up and down life, and half of her life she probably wasn't up for Mangalarti, all these things. But given the challenges that she had, which, for example, I didn't have in my life, that Krishna gave her more difficult test, she worked just as hard as someone who had easier life, let's say. At the end of her life, she left her body in New Vrindavan with His Holiness Radhanath Swami next to her, a group of devotees next to her, sitting and chanting, singing and chanting. And amongst all those devotees, she left her body there. And Radhanath Swami said, without a shadow of doubt, she went back home, back to Godhead. Like there are different signs. When someone goes back to Godhead, there's different signs that come through. And all those signs were there. So in my case, if I did the same, you could say, sadhana as what she did, Krishna might not take me back to Godhead. Because at least up until now, I didn't have that difficult of a life as she did. But in her case, no one knows what a person on the internal level is facing, because given her circumstance, she gave her 100% to Krishna. She tried her best to Krishna. She tried to fulfill the instruction of her spiritual master, who was Srila Prabhupada. To the best of her ability, she went back home, back to God. So this is we have the principles, and on a personal level, we strive to them to the best of our ability. And Krishna is the most intelligent. So if we're trying to trick Krishna and not be 100% sincere, Krishna will trick us at the end and not take us back to Godhead, right? But for our own selves, we keep the highest standard. But for others, we cannot judge, because we don't know. And of course, you weren't at all. But we don't know. That's my word. For others, we just don't know where they're at, so that they can go back home, back to Godhead. Krishna is never bound by any rule. He is completely independent. That's one of his names. And so out of his causeless mercy, he may liberate someone who externally does not deserve the Supreme Lord. But out of his causeless mercy also, he may not liberate the perfectly pure Brahmana or sage who's meditating in the forest and may say, no, this person needs one more life.
Yes, Prabhuji, I can reflect the same thing from the lecture Radhika Raman Prabhu gave in ISKCON of New Jersey. That he gave pictures of 2 different devotees. One got cured with cancer, and there was one Mataji who lived with you guys, with you all in Boise.
Yes. Same one.
Like she didn't get, like Prabhuji was saying that we never know what Krishna's plan is. That's what Bhīṣmadeva is also saying here, that we will not be able to understand him. And that's what Kunti Maharani also saying the previous chapter, that you killed the sons of Pandavas, you killed Bhīṣma, you killed Drona, but you saved my sons, and how am I going to understand you?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And also, like, I want to pass on the comment with Kṛṣṇa Prabhu at the end of the lecture. He says that he's not discouraging anyone, but don't be complacent that chanting 16 rounds in 4 will take you back to Godhead just because Prabhupada wanted us to do that. You can still do that, but how much you're sanitizing the mind is more important, for which we need Krishna's mercy. Just cry for that mercy, and Krishna will take you over. And like he's cautioning, he's saying, don't be complacent.
No, that's a very important point, because Prabhupada's own example. I mean, he said this to the devotees, but then he told the devotees, he said every devotee should do at least 8 hours of service every day. This was an exact quote from Srila Prabhupada. Of course, that service manifests in different ways. For working people, it can be their job that they offer to Krishna, or all these things. But he made it very clear that he didn't want us to stop at 16 rounds. And that's Prabhupada's mood. We should never be complacent, because like Brandy, you're saying, we don't know when the last moment can come. And our chanting is impure. We're not chanting nice rounds. We're not doing this. We're not, Prabhuji, you're saying, the truth is also we struggle to follow the 4 regulative principles. So our process actually is Kripa Siddha, that we want to go back to Godhead by inviting the mercy of the Lord. And so the devotee wants to serve as much as possible so that Krishna might notice that devotee, and by the Lord's mercy, go back home. And one of the main ways we get that mercy is by wanting to follow Prabhupada's desire, which is, chanting the 16 rounds. But it doesn't stop there. Prabhupada gave liberation to devotees like Jayananda Prabhu, who he particularly recognized for their service that they did, the building of the cart, doing the Rath Yatra. And you remember them for those services. And that's why he just handed them the spiritual world. So yes.
Should we be determined enough to make it back to Krishna within this life? I don't know if this is a silly question, or I know that I want to see him at the end of this life, but I don't know if that's humble or actually realistic, and if that could alter my practice in reaching him, my efforts to reach him. So
Prabhupada said that we should, he said this very clearly, that we should never take a chance. What is unknown is unknown, he said. We should always, we should not leave it for a future life, never. Because he says, who knows what may happen in my next life? Do I get the association of devotees? Do I get this determination again to reach the Lord? No one, we may be fortunate enough or we may not, but this life we got the good fortune. There is, spiritual life, as Venkateshwar was saying, is something very merciful, but it's also not something easy. It's not something cheap, because Prabhupada once there's some devotees in Hawaii, and these devotees they left Krishna consciousness, and Prabhupada again and again he requested them that no, stay, don't go, don't fight amongst yourselves, and don't split apart, do this, and it's a very famous incident. But they left. They just they were still actually they left on the pretense. They told Prabhupada that no, we're still chanting and all these things, but we just don't want to be part of your movement. So they left, and then the devotees asked Prabhupada. They said, when will they come back? Will they come back to Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada said they will get Krishna consciousness after 400 lifetimes. So Prabhupada is making the point that although Krishna is very merciful, if we turn away his mercy, as people do, due to some material thing, it's a material thing. We have to remember Krishna is beyond even beyond the immediate, uh, immediate situation that we have. That if we don't realize the value, that's the thing. If we don't realize how valuable Krishna consciousness is, then Krishna will make us realize how valuable it is by giving us another opportunity only after 400 lifetimes. That's the point. So we don't know. We may say, okay, I'll do it in my next lifetime. I won't take it so seriously because I'll do it in my next lifetime. But my next lifetime might not be a human life. I might become a cow and enjoy life for a few hundred lifetimes. So how can I wait?
Well, all I know is that I would much rather meet Krishna at the end of this life than take birth 400 more times. So please pray for me, and I'll pray for all of you. Because I don't think any of us here want to do that.
For sure.
And probably like I know, like, it's too much for me. Like, from all the readings and listenings we do, like we have to understand that going back to Godhead itself is not a goal for a pure devotee, right? The pure devotee leaves that to Krishna. You do whatever you want. I'm always ready to serve you, be it here in this material world or be it in spiritual world, wherever you want to be. I will just do whatever you want me to do. That's what the mood of Prabhupada was. But it's very hard to get into that mood, because great souls like Prabhupada can be like that. But like reading Nectar of Devotion the other day with Indra, I found that the devotee does not ask for bhukti or mukti, like not for material possessions or for liberation. So
yes. So Prabhupada actually says both things. There is one, a few instances where Prabhupada was asked by the devotees, should we want to go back to Godhead? And Prabhupada said, yes, you should, because on our level, so in other words, even if we are serving Krishna in this world, then that is liberation. That is going back to Godhead, because that's back to Godhead means that we don't have any material desires. Now, back to Godhead could be in this world or in the spiritual world, but we have no material desires. So, so in some sense, it is the same thing, that wanting to just serve Krishna life after life for a devotee is the same thing as going back to Godhead. When the Nectar Devotion speaks about mukti, they're speaking about more the liberation that is not intertwined in pure devotional service. So that's sayujya, meaning liberation in which we merge into the Lord, freedom from material distress. So the devotee is not happy with those things. He doesn't want those things. He's not wanting liberation from material miseries. But the devotee, Prabhupada, actually chastised his disciples. He said, oh, no, Prabhupada, we don't want to go back to Godhead. They said this to Prabhupada. They said, we don't want to go back to God. We just want to serve you, Prabhupada, life after life. And Prabhupada said, yes, that is very good. But why don't you want to go back to God? You must want to go back to God. Meaning that is back to Godhead. Back to Godhead means that we just want to serve the Lord. Yes. Any other final questions or comments? We actually had a very nice discussion today. Thank you everyone for your very kind and wonderful attention. I think it's due to the effect of Karthik. I think Karthik is actually making us into nice devotees.
Absolutely, Prabhuji.
Yes. Thank you, Mataji. And thank you, everyone. So we have a Govardhan Puja flyer already. It's all ready to go. Right after this class, I'll post it on the WhatsApp group. And so here we go. I'll just show you here. Here it is. And so please share the word. It is Zoom, but please invite your friends for the Zoom program. It's one of the most important auspicious festivals of the year. The children are doing so much. Everyone is doing so much for this wonderful festival. So let's, sorry, actually, it's the wrong image. So here's the flyer. So send it through social media to your friends, to your family members. The wonderful thing about this festival is that anyone can attend it from anywhere in the world. So they're not limited by any geography. And the kids are working so hard. There's 3 performances that they're doing, and their mothers are working so hard. So it'll be very inspiring for them also. So now is the time, share it on your Facebook pages, on your WhatsApp groups. Some of you are part of, maybe WhatsApp groups in different communities, and invite everyone. This is a universal festival. Everyone has the opportunity to come under Krishna's umbrella, right? Everyone will come under Krishna's umbrella on this day, and we'll have a very wonderful festival. Any comments or questions regarding the Govardhan festival next week? So next week we won't have it at 12 like we normally do. We'll have it in the evening at 5 p.m. EST, 4 p.m. CST. So do note also the time zone. Anything left to discuss, or any questions or comments on this? Well, Brandy, you'll really enjoy a wonderful festival there in Florida. You have the good fortune of being there in person. It's the sweetest devotee festival in the world, especially when you can do it in person. It is the sweetest festival. And Miranda will be in New Vrindavan, you will be in Florida. Here we'll be jealous of you. So it's really just amazing. So it's a kids festival also. So we'll really enjoy it. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji, for the nice class. Let's say Hari Bol 3 times.
Hari Bol.
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol. Hari Bol.
Haribo,
Kalpatarubhyascha
Vasadevaccha patitanam pavane.
Krishna.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.